Bones and All is a 2022 horror film about a girl who is stricken with a disease that requires her to eat people. It's an interesting movie because I knew nothing about this movie going into it other than seeing a brief trailer for it. But about a quarter of the way through this movie, I thought, this movie feels like a book. And of course, not at all to my surprise, during the end credits, it shows up that it was, in fact, based on a novel of the same name. I mean, this movie feels so much like a book, it is crazy. The story is set in the late 80s, and it's about a girl named Marin who has this affliction where she needs to feed on people. It's not quite a vampire style where that's the only thing she eats, because she can eat regular food, but there are moments where just for some reason she needs to feed on people. And it's something that she has had since birth, and it seems to be something that is genetic. That's one of the things that is a little confusing, and ultimately the central critique I had of the film in general, because I imagine it's a little clearer in the book. All right, in books, you have a bit more leeway, and you can have like your central conflict be largely internal, because as a reader, you get access to sort of internal monologues, and you just spend more time in that character's heads. Whereas in a movie, it tends to lean more on the external conflicts, which for obvious visual purposes. Now, internal conflicts is super important in movies as well, and you can certainly have movies with just internal conflicts. But to do that, like, you really need to do a deep dive into the character itself and get a good understanding as to who they are and what they're going through. And that is what this movie is lacking. The basis of the movie is really just this coming of age story as Marin goes out into the world and she realizes that she's not alone. There are others like her, and she ends up meeting a boy named Lee and falls in love with him, and the two of them navigate the world and their sickness together. It's extremely well acted. All the characters they meet along the way are unique. They're interesting, they're memorable. You get a little bit more sense of this sort of dark world that is living just on the surface of the normal world. But ultimately, the overall stakes of the film is what ends up holding it back for me. In the beginning of this movie, her motivation is to find her mother. But that kind of resolves itself about 2/3 of the way in the film, and then the movie just kind of loses its central navigation. It's so bad, in fact, that it ends up doing a bit of a time jump just to sort of reset itself. And then at that point, it doesn't seem to know where to go, and so it just inserts an external conflict just in order to have like a big, exciting ending. I see all of this working much better in the book. But as a movie, if it's going to be a slice of life kind of story of these two on the road, then just make it that, but just with a little bit more clearer defined internal motivations. I couldn't get a good sense of what each character really wanted, and that was sort of my problem. If you want to set up a villain and you want to have more of an external conflict, then do that and have things all sort of lead up to it. But this movie really tried to serve both masters, and I think that's what ultimately made the movie suffer. I'd give this movie a B, but let me know what you think.